So here's a quick overview of the powder coating setup. There's loads of better videos online, so you're better off searching elsewhere. But for me, this is how I've decided to go. And I got El Cheapo powder coating kit from, I think it was Banggood or Alibaba or something like that. Couldn't find one on eBay, so yeah, just shop around. What you want to look for, my advice, is get one with a foot switch rather than the ones with the hand button, because otherwise you got both hands are full and it gets a bit tricky. So you can just operate that with your foot, turn it on and off. So that's the other thing. And also look for one that has an adjustable voltage on the back. Ideally you want them quite low, 30 to 35. I think the lower the voltage, the better for the powder to get around complicated parts. So I tend to run mine in between these two settings, although I can't tell much of a difference. So that's one other thing. And then it's just made up of an earthing clamp, actually, which goes on the part somehow, usually where you're hanging it up. And I've also got the power going to your foot switch, and then the other end is to the gun. And the gun is various types. I think Eastwood has the pot at the bottom. This one has a pot at the top full of powder. You don't want it too full. And also buy a couple of these, because you can then just fill it up, screw the cap on, and keep some dry ready for the next one. And it saves mixing up different containers with different colors. And obviously that screws onto the top like that. Yeah, and you also get ones with different nozzles. I haven't noticed much of a difference. I've just kept the stock one that was on there. You can see the sharp prongs at the end. One word of warning, obviously you might get a nasty whack. So it's always good just to, when you finish, earth out or short circuit the system just by tapping the clamp so that's fully discharged. In case you actually touch that, you'll get a nasty whack. There is also air hose clipped on here, and as the air goes around here, it sort of makes it all cloudy, fluffs it up, blows it out very gently, and as it passes these positively charged prongs at the end here, it charges the particles, I think, which makes them attract to the earthed component that you're trying to powder coat. And the other thing with the air is you've got to have it extremely low, like less than 5 psi, so it's almost just gently blowing out. It's not coming out at high pressure like a paint spray gun. So you need a regulator, one that can be adjusted right down to 5 psi, and I've got mine hooked up in the corner there. So that's set a bit high. That's set at high pressure at the moment. I just wind that right back, pull the trigger just to see the needle drop down to 2 to 3 psi, and I find that's just enough to blow the powder out. Yeah, and just have a little box to keep all your powders. For the Yamaha, I've just gone with this plain old satin black. That's really quite nice. There's a clear gloss as well, which you can clear gloss, matte black, and I got gloss black. That's really quite glossy. So for the engine casings, definitely satin black is good. It does come with some different nozzles at the end, but to be honest, I've not bothered. It seems to work with the standard one for us. And the only other thing is, I highly recommend powder coating somewhere where you don't want the dust to go, because there is a fair amount of dust floating around. So this is my spray booth, and I've got a very strong fan underneath. You can just see the outlet just there, and that sucks all the powder away, which is good. But I always run a mask on and gloves. So I'll show you how I set this up. I've got the part hanging on a wire hook, and the earthing clamp is connected directly to that, so it's as short a circuit as possible. And you can see it's very lightly blowing the powder out onto the part, and it's attracting quite well. And you just basically waggle it around the part to allow the particles to gently float into all the corners. It's as simple as that, and then you can just slowly rotate it and we're good. So then when that's done, you've got to carefully move it and put it into the oven. Obviously you don't want to tap it because the powder could fall off, but it's fairly stuck on there. It's not going to blow away. I've not had issues where it's come off in between unhooking it here and putting it into the oven. It's quite stable. And the other stuff to get is obviously some, I think they call it Capcom tape, or whatever, powder coating, heat-proof tape basically it is. That's 20mm wide. But I'd also get one that's 30mm. It's just a bit better for covering some of the bigger parts. And also just a narrow one for the fiddly stuff. So that's 10mm wide. And these silicone bungs is slightly squashy, and the powder coat doesn't stick to it. Well, the powder does, but when it's cooked in the oven, it doesn't stick to it, which is good. Then, as I've discussed in another video, you need an oven, and obviously you want an oven that's big enough for your parts. Now, for motorcycling, we're lucky we can get away with quite small parts. In fact, all my crankcases, which is probably the largest thing I could do, will fit in there. And because this was a free oven, it didn't come with any of the oven rails, so I made up something like that to hang parts, and that just fits nicely in there, so I can hang a couple of parts at a time. But for the crankcases, because of their shape, they can sit on the bottom, because the bottom half of the crankcase, or the open face, obviously that's masked off and is not getting any powder treating, so it can sit there nicely and not damage the paintwork, and it's a lot easier than trying to hang up crankcases that way. So if you're clever on how you mask it up, you can get away with that. The other important bit, because these are just domestic ovens, they're not very accurate, invest in a little thermocouple meter. This one is, the simple type you can get in most electronic stores now, just $30, and that way you're at the right temperature. Don't trust these because they're not accurate, and I'm finding it's about 10 degrees out. So the process is, obviously you want to heat up the oven, make sure you get up to, in our case, it's 180 degrees centigrade for 15 minutes or 200 for 10. So I'm aiming for the lower temperature, but for a bit longer. And then the other critical thing is, depending on the size of your parts, they take a long time to warm up. So you don't just pop it in cold once it's powder coated, because some of the larger parts take up 10 minutes to get up to temperature. So what I do is, with this system, it's a laser pointer one, is one that you put the part in, leave it for 5 minutes to heat up again, and then after 5 minutes you can just crack open the oven, put the laser pointer on the part that you're trying to check, and you'll be surprised, it's sometimes only at 100 degrees after 5 minutes. So just shut it, give it another 5 minutes, keep checking it every now and again. You've got to be quick so you're not losing too much heat. And then when it's at temperature, you want to start the clock, in our case 15 minutes. That way you've fully cured the part. And the best thing about powder coating is the fact that as soon as it's cooled down, it's good to go and it won't chip, unlike spray painting, which takes a while for it to harden, days sometimes, and you can still chip it afterwards. So let's get into it. So I'm just showing you the condition of the cases before we do any prep work, sort of like a before and after look. Okay, before and after. So I've just speed blasted the cases. They've come up quite good, so all the paint's off and totally degreased. This is ready for masking up all the bearing faces and things like that, getting ready for getting the powder on. The clutch cover come up well, but there's a lot of pitting you can see here, right, and this is quite a visual spot on the bike, meaning it's going to be seen. So I think I'll just fill this in, these little pinholes, with some JB Weld, because I think you can powder coat to JB Weld. It'll just be a smear in the holes just to fill them in, hopefully. Yes, that's come up quite well. The inside I'm not going to paint, I'm just going to mask it up and just do the outside. So just a skim of JB Weld, and we'll see if it works. See if it hides those pinholes. So I got some wet and dry 240 grit, and start off with that. And also I've got some finer 600, but the 240 should be fine given that the texture of the aluminium is quite rough anyway. So it's just a case of sanding back. Hopefully won't take too long. So it took a bit longer. I think I put, even though it looked like a light skim, I think it was too heavy around the edges. There's a big lip that had to be sanded back, and that took a long time. So hopefully you probably can't see it too well, but obviously all those black dots are now filled in, hopefully. One trick is to just put a film of water over it and get the light to shine, and if you see like divots, it'll highlight any holes or stuff. So it looks okay. So hopefully that's worked, and I've done some bits around the top here. So I'll give that a clean, and with this much water on it, we'll need to probably stick it in the oven for 20 minutes, heat it right up, so any moisture in little gaps or grooves and whatever evaporates out. Because if there's any moisture or stuff left on this, what can happen, I think, with powder coating is you get outgassing. So you cover it in the powder, and when it goes in, any moisture or oils start to bubble and obviously gas out, and then you get all this like wrinkling effect, I think. So we'll stick it in, dry it fully out, mask it up, and then powder coat it. Okay, so oven's on at 180. I've bunged up all the holes where I don't want the powder coating to go. I've got like a box of silicone plugs, and also I've just masked off the back of the clutch cover, just to try and keep as much of the powder coating out as possible. The paper is actually oven-proof paper up to 220 degrees. You use it for cooking, so this is a test or experiment to see if it works. So now we'll go upstairs and whack some powder on. So I've got a mask on, and in the background you probably can hear the I've got a big extractor fan, so it sucks a lot of the dust away. But I'm having a little bit of difficulty. This is sort of the first time I've done powder coating. A little bit of difficulty getting the powder to really stick in all the areas. I think it's a bit of a technique, and I think I've got the voltage up way too high. It should be much lower at 30 or 35. I'm probably not applying enough powder in one good shot. Rather, I'm just sort of doing lots of little bits, and I think it's just collecting a bit too high and just looks a bit thick to me. But you can see it's not really getting into the nooks and crannies nice and easily. Yeah, that just looks a bit too heavy, and I think we'll see that later on when I take it out of the oven. But it looks, I mean, looking at where the JB Weld is, it doesn't seem to be, it looks very even, put it that way. Right, let's see how this came out. And it's not looking good. So, as I feared, the bloomin' JB Weld, it doesn't adhere to it. And whether or not that's because, yeah, it just hasn't flowed into those gaps. Bugger. I mean, overall everywhere else is not too bad, but that's pretty bad because, like I said, it's going to stand out like a proverbial. Everywhere else, of course, looks fine, but that is not good enough. So I don't know what to do there. I think I'm going to do some more test pieces. Of course, the test pieces, they always turn out well. So that's a test piece. But that's a shame. It's all got to come off. Mask it up again. While I was editing the video though, it was a bit strange. I noticed here where I did put a lot more JB Weld, it seems to be fine. It took all the powder quite nicely. Anyway, I'll let that cool off and we'll have a closer look. Okay, before I thought I'd clean it all back to bare metal, I'll give it another quick blow with the powder to see if it would fill in the holes. So we'll see what happens. Turn this off. Certainly improved. You can still see there's some dimples in there. I think what's happening is I've got the voltage too high and maybe trying to put too much of a coat on. Yeah, I think I might just give this one more dusting, light dusting, to see if it improves it a bit. That'll be three coats of powder on this. Okay, so we're going to do a bit of an experiment here. Hopefully you can see what I've done is just made some divots, in various size divots in the aluminium, and we'll just experiment to see on a test piece how the JB Weld reacts. Maybe when I was sanding it too deep and it pulled the JB Weld out of the hole, possibly, I don't know. I did leave it to dry for 15 hours and everything was spotless. So anyway, I'll try different techniques, sort of leave it a little bit prouder maybe on some of these, sand it right back flush on others, and see how it turns out. Just trying to make sure I work it into the holes. You can still see the holes when you put the paste over it. Anyway, I'll leave that a bit proud. There's a lot of sanding there to do. You can still see the divots still. Maybe that's why I had the problem that I was sanding it back too much and not really filling in the humps. I might have to do two goes on some of these, which is a pain because it's 15 hours to dry. I'll have to do it again tomorrow, which is annoying, but I've got plenty of other things to go on with. Cool. I'll leave that set and see how we go. Well, this is a bit depressing. Yeah, it's all got to come off again, which is annoying, but we'll just get on with it. So it'll be an interesting test to see how robust this is. I think let's do a scratch test. I mean, it's not coming through to the aluminium underneath. So, I mean, it's pretty awful as a scribe, but that's quite good. Obviously, it's marking it a bit, but I just got 3 coats on there. So, what we'll do is we'll attack it with the paint stripper first. That will hopefully lift off most of it, then sandblast it and then bead blast it. In Australia we can still get the stinky stuff. It's not been, I think in Europe now this is banned or something because it's quite potent. In fact, I put an extraction fan on in a minute to get rid of the fumes because it is a bit strong. As always, just plonk it on. The thicker the better. also I haven't left it to soak in. Always tempted to get stuck into it. Paint stripping. I'm supposed to leave it for, what does it say, 2 to 15 minutes. So I might just give it 5 more minutes. Okay, so that's the paint stripper peeled off. That took about probably 45 minutes to do. I'll try and do get as much of the paint off as possible before I put it in the sandblaster, just because the sandblaster is not brilliant. It's good to do all the nooks and crannies, but I don't think it'll take too long. Just to, if the powder coat's pretty complete and new, I think it will struggle my little Mickey Mouse sandblasting cabinet. So I'll get most of it off manually and then try and finish it off in the sandblaster. So I've just gone over quickly with a thin skim of JB Weld, like another coat in effect, and I'll gently sand that back. Hopefully that'll blend in nicely. Okay, the test piece doesn't work either. I'm still having problems. So hopefully it's quite clear. This side was JB welded. The weld was then sanded flush, so it's completely smooth or flat. And then this section was sandblasted, but you can see you can't tell the difference between the transition between sandblasted and non-sandblasted. Whatever happens, it looks like the powder is just not adhering to the JB Weld. It's almost repelled, so that's why it's making it look like these holes are bigger than they actually are, because before you would not have seen them. So it's clearly the powder is being rejected by the JB Weld. And on the back where I didn't sand it completely smooth, again the same thing. This section was sandblasted, this was left normal. The sandblasting took a little bit more of the JB Weld off, but you can see where the large feathering was done, it just doesn't want to stick to it, or is not statically sticking to it. So, cut long story short, I gave the powder supplier a quick call, and they suggested to do it while it's quite warm. There's a technique called hot flocking, where you preheat the part, and as you spray, the fact that it's hot makes the powder physically stick to the surface. He said be careful, because some people run it quite hot, almost like 150 degrees C, and it almost like just completely melts and goes to gloss straight away. But so we're going to try heating this part up. So we'll go back to scratch, strip it all off, put some JB Weld on again, and this time heat it up to 60 degrees C, and then quick blast with the powder and see if it is more evenly coating to the part. Good news, it looks like hot flocking worked. So it's come up quite well in the end. I managed to fix the JB Weld issue in that it seems to have adhered, and we got rid of all that pitting, which is nice. This is all like really bad, if you remember. So hot flocking seemed to work, as in left this in the oven for at 180, took it out, blasted it. The only thing is, I think I'm applying too heavy a coat. That's the main thing I need to adjust, particularly on this one, the upper half of the crankcase. Very heavy, I think. I was having problems trying to get the powder to get in these little, right down in the groove, the valley there. It's sort of like I think they call it an eddy effect, and the surrounding area's got I suppose a magnetic field happening, and the dust is not wanting to get in there. It sort of gets attracted to the other parts. So I was putting on more and more powder, and so much so that the serial number of the engine is almost invisible because it's filled up all the valleys of the numbering here, and yeah, it's almost impossible to see. So got to work that out. This is quite a heavy coat. I mean, it's good in that it's not going to chip off. Yeah, but so overall that's sort of come up quite well. I just need to remove the tape, and like I say, I've kept the inside clean as possible. We've got a little bit of, I suppose you call it a overspray here, so I just need to sand that back because you want the faces nice and smooth. You don't want like a bit of powder coating bubble or edge, because it means the cases won't be, you know, flush when we clamp it up. But by taping it off, you minimize the amount that you need to remove. So now I've taken off the masking tape, there could be a small lip, so just using a very fine bit of emery cloth and a sanding block. So you can see around here you've got to be a bit careful because there's quite a bit of build-up of paint, so we need to make sure we knock that back. At the same time, you don't want to be taking off any of the metal because it's then you'll get leaks. So it's just enough to knock off the paint. So even if you're spray painting or powder coating, you just got to be careful. Any overspray that gets on any of the mating faces, particularly like things like the bearings. So you can hear it's quite subtle, but the thickness of the paint or powder coating is enough to stuff up your bearing, you know, properly seating. So you've got to make sure that's all cleaned out. And of course, one other thing you need to do is just run a tap down all the threads again, and use the air gun to really clean out any fluff or grit that's still in there. That's very important. Otherwise, if you go to assemble it and then you find you can't get a screw in because it's full of powder coating, best to do it now before you start reassembling it. As well as cleaning out the threads, make sure all the machine faces are free of powder coating. So we've got 1, 2, 3 faces here, as well as the face all the way around on this side. On the other side, we've got the surrounding edge all along here, all in there. That screw face, the bolt face, and that face there, and that around the Kickstarter spring. So just make sure that they're clear. That one's fine. Looking at the video prior to stripping, all this was powder coated. And then on the top, the tacho blanking plug, whatever it is, and the clutch arm bearing seal needs to be free of, so right in there on that edge, that needs to be free of powder coating. That's as per the original. Everything else can be covered up still, including the bolt hole locations for clamping up the crank cases. And finally the lower crank case. So this will be just in a clear satin gloss finish. So I'll cover it up as much as I can so I don't get any of the stuff inside, and just left where the gearbox sprocket is, output shaft, we'll powder coat that just because it makes it easier to clean, and hopefully it will keep looking a bit better because it was very furry. So I've just glass bead blasted it. We'll wax some clear on, and that'll be it. So that's come up all right. Hopefully that'll last a bit longer. Stop it from furring up. It's the underneath, so you won't see it much, but hopefully it'll stop a lot of the crud and stuff coming up. And like I said, I've done inside here, so it makes cleaning a bit easier. So yeah, this is all good to go back together.